The galaxy had known peace for exactly 347 standard cycles. The Galactic Council maintained order through careful diplomacy, trade agreements, and the occasional show of force from their impressive fleets. 7 major species had formed this alliance, each bringing their unique strengths to the collective whole. The reptilian Vorth contributed their advanced engineering. The crystalline Zephyrians shared their energy manipulation technologies. The aquatic Narians offered their biological sciences, and 4 others each played their part in the grand tapestry of galactic civilization. Humans were not part of this tapestry. In fact, most species had never heard of them. Commander Zarkthos of the Vorth Supremacy stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Conquest, watching the 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star system through the main view screen. His scaled fingers drummed against the command console as he reviewed the sensor readings once more. The planet showed signs of industrial civilization, but the technology levels were primitive by galactic standards. Nuclear fission, basic spaceflight, simple energy weapons, nothing that would pose a threat to his fleet of 12 heavy cruisers. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "we have completed our orbital survey. The planet contains approximately 7.8 billion sentient beings. They call themselves humans. No evidence of faster-than-light capability or energy shielding technology." Zarkthos nodded slowly. The Vorth had been expanding their territory for decades, always careful to avoid direct conflict with the other Council species. But this system lay in unclaimed space, far from the established borders. A perfect opportunity to add new resources and slave labor to the supremacy. "Begin the demonstration bombardment," he commanded. "Target their largest population centers. Make it clear that resistance is futile. Target their largest population. Target their largest population." The first plasma bombardment struck what the humans called New York City. The energy beams carved through skyscrapers like a hot blade through ice, turning glass and steel into molten rivers. Similar strikes hit London, Tokyo, Beijing, and a dozen other major cities simultaneously. From orbit, Zarkthos watched the destruction with satisfaction. The psychological impact would be devastating. Most species surrendered within hours of such a display, but something unexpected happened. Instead of the desperate surrender transmissions he expected, the humans went silent. Their primitive communication networks went dark, their military installations disappeared from sensors, and their population centers seemed to empty overnight. It was as if the entire planet had simply vanished. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting some kind of interference with our scanning systems. We're getting intermittent contacts, but they disappear almost immediately." Zarkthos frowned. "Interference? From what source?" "Unknown, Commander. The signals appear to be coming from multiple locations across the planet's surface, but when we focus our sensors on those coordinates, we find nothing." This was troubling. In all his years of conquest, Zarkthos had never encountered a species capable of evading Vorth sensor technology. He decided to land ground forces to investigate. 12 assault transports descended through the atmosphere, each carrying a full battalion of Vorth warriors in powered combat armor. The first transport landed in the ruins of what had once been a major human city. The warriors emerged, weapons ready, but found only empty streets and abandoned buildings. No signs of life, no indication of where the population had gone. As they advanced through the urban maze, their commanding officer began to feel increasingly uneasy. "Squad leaders, report," he ordered through his comm system. "Alpha Squad, nothing to report. Empty buildings, sir." "Beta Squad, same here. It's like they just disappeared." "Gamma Squad." "Wait, did anyone else see that?" The commander paused. "See what?" "Movement. 3rd floor of the building to our east. Could have sworn I saw something." Free 1. The Vorth warriors trained their weapons on the building, their advanced targeting systems scanning for life signs. Nothing registered on their sensors, but the feeling of being watched was undeniable. They advanced carefully, covering each other as they had been trained. These were veteran soldiers, hardened by dozens of successful campaigns. They knew how to handle frightened primitives. The first warrior died without making a sound. One moment he was scanning the street ahead, the next he was on the ground, his armor's life support systems showing flatlined readings. His squad mates spun around, weapons raised, but saw nothing. No enemy contacts, no weapons fire, no indication of what had killed their comrade. "Command, we have a man down," the squad leader reported. "Cause unknown. No enemy contacts visible." Before the commander could respond, 2 more warriors collapsed. Still no visible attackers, no energy signatures, nothing on their sensors. It was as if death itself was moving among them, invisible and silent. "Fall back to the transport," the commander ordered. But as his forces began their withdrawal, they found their path blocked, not by enemy soldiers or barricades, but by something far more unsettling: bodies. The corpses of the advance scouts they had sent ahead, arranged in a perfect line across the street. Each one killed with surgical precision. Their armor intact, but their occupants dead. Panic began to spread among the Vorth ranks. These were supposedly primitive beings, armed with nothing more advanced than chemical propellants and crude explosives. How were they killing trained warriors in powered armor without being detected? The answer came in the form of a single human figure that seemed to materialize from the shadows between 2 buildings. He wore no armor, carried no visible weapons, and moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost supernatural. Before any of the Vorth warriors could react, the figure was among them. What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. The human moved like liquid darkness, flowing between the alien warriors with impossible speed and precision. Each movement was economical, purposeful, deadly. Warriors who had survived dozens of campaigns fell like wheat before a scythe. Their advanced armor, designed to withstand energy weapons and explosive rounds, offered no protection against the precise strikes that found every weakness, every gap, every vulnerable point. In less than 30 seconds, an entire platoon of Vorth elite troops was dead or dying. The human figure paused for a moment, surveying his work, then simply walked away. As he moved, he seemed to fade back into the shadows until he was completely invisible once more. The surviving Vorth commander, watching through his troops' helmet cameras from the safety of his transport, felt something he had never experienced before in his military career: genuine terror. He immediately ordered all ground forces to withdraw to orbit. But as the transports lifted off, he realized that not all of his soldiers had made it back. Dozens were missing, their comm signals dead, their last known positions scattered across the planet's surface. Back on the flagship, Zarkthos reviewed the combat recordings with growing unease. The footage showed his elite warriors being systematically eliminated by what appeared to be a single human operative. The figure moved with inhuman speed and precision, striking from impossible angles, disappearing and reappearing like a ghost. "Analysis?" he demanded from his intelligence officer. "Inconclusive, sir. The human appears to be using some form of advanced camouflage technology, possibly combined with enhanced physical capabilities. However, our sensors detect no artificial augmentations or technological implants. It's as if he's simply naturally superior to our forces." Zarkthos rejected this assessment immediately. No primitive species could naturally exceed Vorth military capabilities. There had to be an explanation. Perhaps the humans had hidden allies, or secret technology they hadn't detected. He decided to demonstrate the futility of resistance with a more direct approach. "Prepare for orbital bombardment," he ordered. "Target the area where our forces were engaged. Full intensity." The plasma beams lanced down from orbit, turning several city blocks into molten glass. When the bombardment ceased, nothing remained but a crater several kilometers wide. Surely no living thing could have survived such destruction. But even as the energy dissipated, the Vorth sensors detected something impossible. A single figure, walking calmly out of the devastation, apparently unharmed. The human looked up at the orbiting fleet, raised one hand in what might have been a greeting or a challenge, then disappeared once more into the urban landscape. "Sir," the communications officer reported with obvious nervousness, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. Put it through." The main screen flickered, then displayed the face of a human. He appeared middle-aged by the standards of his species, with graying hair and calm, intelligent eyes. When he spoke, it was in accented but perfectly understandable galactic standard. "I am Director Harrison, of what you might call our planetary defense organization," the human said. "You have attacked our world unprovoked, killed millions of our people, and attempted to invade our territory. This aggression will not be tolerated." Zarkthos stepped forward. "I am Commander Zarkthos of the Vorth Supremacy. You will surrender immediately and prepare your population for relocation and integration into our empire. Further resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species." The human smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Commander, you seem to be operating under a misunderstanding. You are not our conquerors. You are our test subjects." Before Zarkthos could respond, his tactical officer called out in alarm. "Sir, I'm detecting multiple objects launching from the planet's surface. They're too small to be ships, but they're moving at incredible velocity." On the view screen, dozens of tiny contacts were rising from Earth's atmosphere, accelerating at rates that should have been impossible for objects of their size. As they approached the fleet, the Vorth sensors finally managed to get a clear reading on them. They were humans. Individual humans, somehow surviving in the vacuum of space without protective suits, propelling themselves with methods that defied conventional physics. Each one was heading directly for a different ship in the Vorth fleet. "Impossible," Zarkthos muttered. "No biological organism can survive in hard vacuum." His answer came when the first human reached the nearest heavy cruiser. Instead of being destroyed by the ship's point defense systems, the figure somehow passed through the vessel's energy shields as if they didn't exist. Moments later, the cruiser's lights went dark. "The relentless fury is not responding to hails," the communications officer reported. "All systems appear to be offline." One by one, the other ships in the fleet began going dark as the impossible human figures reached them. No explosions, no visible damage, just the systematic shutdown of some of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Zarkthos watched in growing horror as his fleet was neutralized by enemies who shouldn't have been able to exist in space, much less disable military vessels with their bare hands. When only his flagship remained operational, he made a desperate decision. "Prepare to jump to hyperspace," he ordered. "We're withdrawing immediately." But as the inevitable conquest began to power up its faster-than-light drive, something appeared on the bridge, not through the doors or transporters, but simply materializing from empty air, like a shadow-given form. It was the same human figure that had eliminated the ground forces. Up close, Zarkthos could see that he appeared completely ordinary by human standards. Average height, unremarkable build, wearing simple dark clothing, but his eyes held depths that seemed to contain the cold emptiness of space itself. "Going somewhere, Commander?" the human asked in the same calm tone as the director who had spoken earlier. Zarkthos reached for his sidearm, but found his hand wouldn't move. None of his bridge crew seemed able to move at all. They stood frozen like statues, while the human walked casually among them. "Allow me to introduce myself," the figure continued. "My designation is Operative 7. But most species that encounter me learn to use a different name. They call me Reaper." The human paused in front of the main view screen, looking out at the disabled Vorth fleet. "Your species made a critical error in judgment, Commander. You assumed that because we haven't developed faster-than-light travel or energy weapons, we must be primitive. You never considered that we might have chosen to focus our development in other directions." Reaper turned back to face the paralyzed Vorth commander. "For the past several centuries, humanity has been preparing for contact with alien civilizations. We assumed that any species capable of interstellar travel would likely be more technologically advanced than us. So we didn't try to match your technology. Instead, we decided to exceed your limitations." The human gestured, and holographic displays appeared around the bridge, showing images that made Zarkthos's blood run cold. Humans moving at impossible speeds, phasing through solid matter, surviving in environments that would kill any known form of life. Warriors who seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, making them effectively invisible to conventional sensors. "We call them Reapers," the human explained. "Humans who have undergone enhancement processes that push the boundaries of biological possibility. They can move faster than your eyes can track, survive in hard vacuum, phase through your energy shields, and disable your technology with their bare hands. Each one is worth approximately 1,000 conventional soldiers. Zarkthos finally managed to speak, though his voice came out as barely a whisper. Impossible. No biological organism can. Can what? Exceed the speed of light locally? Phase shift through solid matter? Manipulate electromagnetic fields with their nervous system? Reaper smiled coldly. You're thinking like an engineer, Commander. You see the universe as a collection of limits to be respected. We see it as a collection of rules to be broken. The paralysis suddenly released, and Zarkthos collapsed to his knees. Around him, his bridge crew were also falling, clutching their heads as if in severe pain. I'm downloading the contents of your computer systems, Reaper explained conversationally. Fleet positions, technology specifications, star charts, military protocols. Everything. I'm also leaving a message in your ship's memory banks. When you return to Vorth space, you will deliver it to your leaders. The pain intensified, and several of the bridge crew lost consciousness. Zarkthos fought to remain aware, but felt his vision darkening around the edges. The message is simple, Reaper continued. Humanity claims this entire star system as sovereign territory. Any attempt to return here will be met with extreme prejudice. Any act of aggression against human interests anywhere in the galaxy will result in swift and decisive retaliation. We are not interested in joining your Galactic Council. We are not interested in your trade agreements or diplomatic protocols. We want to be left alone. Zarkthos tried to speak, to demand an explanation, but found he could no longer form words. Oh, and Commander? Reaper's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Make sure they understand that this was just a demonstration. What you've seen today is less than 1% of our actual capabilities. If we ever have to make a second demonstration, the human figure began to fade, becoming translucent like smoke. Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Darkness claimed Zarkthos, and when he awoke, he was alone on his bridge. His crew lay unconscious around him, but they were all breathing. Outside the view screen, his fleet hung powerless in space, but intact. No permanent damage had been done, except to his confidence and his understanding of humanity's place in the galactic order. As the inevitable conquest limped away from Earth on backup power, its faster-than-light drive mysteriously restored just long enough to reach Vorth space, Zarkthos realized that everything had changed. The galaxy's balance of power had just shifted dramatically, and most of the established civilizations didn't even know it yet, but they would learn. The Vorth would make sure of that, because now they knew the truth. Humanity wasn't a primitive species waiting to be conquered. They were apex predators who had been waiting patiently for something interesting to hunt. And across the galaxy, other species would soon learn to fear a name that moved like whispering wind and vanished like shadow. They would learn to fear the Reaper. The news of the Vorth defeat spread through unofficial channels first, carried by merchant vessels and independent traders who noticed the sudden withdrawal of Vorth forces from several frontier sectors. The official reports were classified, but rumors had a way of traveling faster than light in the interconnected galaxy. On the Galactic Council homeworld of Nexus Prime, representatives from 7 major species gathered in emergency session. The crystalline spires of the council chambers resonated with harmonic frequencies as the Zephyrian delegate expressed concern about the Vorth's unusual behavior. Our intelligence networks report that an entire supremacy fleet has withdrawn from the Outer Rim sectors, Ambassador Threlian announced, her crystalline form pulsing with agitated colors. This withdrawal was unscheduled and appears to have been executed in haste. The Vorth representative, Admiral Korovex, sat silent at his delegation's position. He had been briefed on the classified reports from Commander Zarkthos, but the details were so unbelievable that even he questioned their accuracy. Perhaps the Supremacy has simply decided to consolidate their territory, suggested the Nerian delegate, his aquatic features rippling with diplomatic neutrality. The Outer Rim sectors have always been sparsely populated, but the Council's intelligence chief, a methodical construct named Unit Prime, had been analyzing data patterns for weeks. The withdrawal correlates with a series of unconfirmed reports about a new species in the Terran system. Designation: humans. The information is fragmentary, but suggests first contact occurred approximately 30 standard days ago. Admiral Korvex felt a chill run through his scaled hide. The Terran system. The same coordinates where Zarkthos had encountered. Whatever those things were. The Vorth Supremacy has not reported any first contact events, he said carefully, maintaining diplomatic protocol even as his mind raced. Unit Prime's optical sensors focused on him with mechanical precision. Indeed. Which is curious, given that supremacy regulations require immediate notification of all sapient species encounters, unless, of course, the contact was deemed problematic. The word hung in the air like a threat. In galactic politics, problematic first contact usually meant one of two things. Either the new species posed a significant threat, or the contacting civilization had done something that violated interspecies law. The session was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Council's Deep Space Monitoring Network. A human vessel had just emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus Prime system. Impossible, Admiral Korvex breathed. The reports indicated they had no faster-than-light capability. Unit Prime was already analyzing the sensor data. Vessel specifications are unusual. The ship appears to be constructed from materials not found in our databases. Energy signatures are unlike any known propulsion system. And the construct paused, which was unprecedented in Unit Prime's operational history. The vessel appears to be crewed by a single individual. On the main display screen, an image of the approaching ship appeared. It was sleek and angular, with design aesthetics that seemed somehow both primitive and advanced. As the Council watched, it moved through the system's outer defenses without triggering a single sensor alert, despite those defenses being designed to detect and track any object larger than a grain of sand. How is that possible? The Zephyrian delegate demanded. Unknown, Unit Prime admitted. The vessel appears to be using some form of sensor dampening technology that operates on principles we do not understand. The human ship took up position exactly at the diplomatic contact point, maintaining perfect distance and heading according to galactic protocol. A communication request arrived moments later. This is Director Harrison of the Terran Defense Coordination, requesting permission to address the Galactic Council on matters of mutual interest. The same voice. Admiral Korvex recognized it from the classified recordings in the Zarkthos report. This was the human who had spoken to the Vorth commander just before their fleet was mysteriously disabled. After a brief consultation, the Council agreed to grant the communication request. The main screen flickered, then displayed the image of a human male. He appeared unremarkable by any galactic standard. But something about his calm demeanor suggested depths that weren't immediately apparent. Honored representatives, Harrison began. I come before you to formally announce humanity's presence in this galaxy and to establish our position regarding interspecies relations. Ambassador Threlian pulsed with diplomatic colors. Welcome to galactic civilization, Director Harrison. We trust your species is prepared to begin the standard integration process into the Galactic Council framework. Harrison's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, Ambassador. Humanity has no interest in integration into existing galactic power structures. We are here to establish our territorial claims and to make our position clear regarding future interactions. The council chamber fell silent. This was not how first contact was supposed to proceed. New species were expected to be grateful for the opportunity to join the galactic community, not to make demands. Director, Unit Prime interjected, perhaps you are not aware of the standard protocols for newly contacted civilizations. There are established procedures for technological transfer, cultural exchange, and gradual integration into. We are fully aware of your protocols, Harrison interrupted smoothly. We have been monitoring galactic communications for several decades. We understand your systems, your technologies, and your methods of operation. We simply have no interest in participating. Admiral Korovets leaned forward. And what if the galactic community has an interest in ensuring your participation? The question hung in the air for a long moment. Then Harrison smiled. And every representative in the chamber felt an inexplicable chill. That would be inadvisable, Admiral. As I believe your colleague, Commander Zarkthos, could explain in detail. So they knew. Somehow, these humans knew about the classified Vorth operation. Admiral Korovets realized that his species' reputation for military superiority had just taken a devastating blow. The Terran system and surrounding sectors are now under human protection, Harrison continued. We claim no interest in territories currently occupied by galactic civilizations. We simply wish to be left alone to develop in our own way. This seems like a reasonable arrangement. The Nurian delegate rippled with diplomatic concern. Director, surely you understand that the galaxy operates on principles of mutual cooperation and shared resources. Isolation is not a viable long-term strategy for any species. Perhaps not for most species, Harrison agreed. But humanity has certain, unique characteristics that make us well-suited to independence. Unit Prime had been analyzing the human ship's energy signatures during the conversation. Director, our sensors are detecting unusual readings from your vessel. Would you be willing to share technical specifications for our scientific databases? I'm afraid that's not possible, Harrison replied. However, I can offer a demonstration that might address your curiosity about our capabilities. Before anyone could ask what he meant, the human ship simply vanished, not through hyperspace jump or conventional stealth technology, but a complete disappearance that left the Council's sensors showing empty space where the vessel had been moments before. Unit Prime, Ambassador Threlyon demanded. Analysis? The ship has not moved to hyperspace. It has not activated any detectable cloaking device. According to our instruments, it has simply ceased to exist. Then Harrison's voice returned to the communication channel, though there was no visible source for the transmission. The demonstration is not yet complete. Honored representatives. Alarms began blaring throughout the council chambers as security sensors detected an unauthorized presence in the building. On the main screen, surveillance cameras showed a human figure walking calmly through the supposedly impregnable security barriers surrounding the council complex. Guards moved to intercept, but the figure seemed to phase through their energy weapons and restraining fields as if they were made of light. Within minutes, the chamber doors opened and the human figure walked inside. It was not Director Harrison, but someone else entirely. This human moved with the same fluid grace that Admiral Korovets had seen in the classified recordings from Earth. Allow me to introduce myself, the figure said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I am Operative 12. My colleagues call me Ghost. The human looked around the chamber, studying each representative with clinical interest. The director asked me to personally deliver humanity's formal position statement. We want to ensure there are no misunderstandings. Unit Prime's sensors were frantically trying to get readings on the intruder, but the results were impossible to interpret. The entity appears to exist in a state of quantum superposition, the construct reported with obvious confusion. It is simultaneously present and absent, solid and incorporeal. Ghost smiled at the analysis. Close, but not quite accurate. I exist in what you might call parallel dimensional space. I'm here, but also not here. It's a useful skill when one needs to deliver messages to heavily guarded locations. The human moved to the center of the chamber, standing in the space normally reserved for formal declarations. Humanity's position is simple. We claim the Sol system and all space within a 50 light-year radius as sovereign human territory. Any intrusion into this space will be considered an act of aggression. Any attempt to force our participation in galactic civilization will be met with appropriate resistance. Ambassador Threlyon pulsed with aggressive colors. You cannot simply claim territory without going through proper channels. The Galactic Council has jurisdiction over all inhabited systems. No. Ghost replied calmly. The Galactic Council has jurisdiction over those systems whose inhabitants choose to recognize that authority. Humanity does not. The construct's voice carried a note of mechanical confusion. Director, Your species appears to have developed along lines that differ significantly from established evolutionary patterns. Would you be willing to provide data on your enhancement processes for scientific study? Olo. Ghost's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. The techniques we use to enhance human capabilities are not for sale, trade, or study. They are, however, available for demonstration purposes. Before anyone could react, Ghost was standing directly behind Unit Prime's position, having moved faster than any organic being should have been able to. For example, enhanced human reflexes allow for movement at approximately 40% of light speed in local space. Enhanced human neural processing permits the manipulation of electromagnetic fields through conscious thought. Enhanced human physiology enables survival in environments that would kill most known life forms. Ghost returned to the center of the chamber in another impossible burst of movement. These enhancements are not technological. They are evolutionary adaptations that humanity has developed through methods I will not describe. The implications were staggering. If humans could naturally develop abilities that exceeded the technological capabilities of most galactic civilizations, then everything the Council thought it knew about biological limitations was wrong. There is one more item on my agenda, Ghost continued. Humanity is aware that several galactic civilizations have been expanding their territories through conquest and forced integration. This practice will cease immediately. Admiral Koroveks bristled at the implication. The Vorth supremacy operates within established galactic law. Our expansion protocols have been approved by. Your expansion protocols typically involve the systematic destruction of resistance forces, followed by the enslavement or elimination of conquered populations, Ghost interrupted. This is not acceptable behavior. The human's voice remained calm. But something in the air changed. Every representative in the chamber suddenly felt as if they were being watched by something vast and patient and utterly without mercy. Humanity will be monitoring galactic activities closely. Any species that continues to engage in aggressive expansion will receive a personal visit from our diplomatic corps. The Zephyrian delegate pulsed with nervous energy. And what form would this diplomacy take? Ghost smiled, and the expression was somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. We prefer to customize our diplomatic approaches to the specific situation. For example, species that rely heavily on technology might find their computer systems developing unexpected problems. Species with centralized government structures might discover that their leadership has difficulty making decisions. Species with large military forces might find that their weapons have become unreliable. Unit Prime processed this information with mechanical precision. You are describing acts of war. No, Ghost corrected. We are describing acts of correction. War implies conflict between equals. What we are describing is more like pest control. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. This was not a negotiation or a diplomatic exchange. It was a declaration of supremacy delivered with absolute confidence. Is there anything else the Council would like to discuss? Ghost asked politely. No one spoke. The representatives sat in stunned silence, trying to process the reality that everything they thought they knew about galactic power structures had just been turned upside down. Excellent. In that case, my demonstration is complete. Ghost began to fade, becoming translucent like morning mist. Director Harrison will be returning to human space now. We trust there will be no attempts to follow or intercept his vessel. The human figure vanished completely, leaving behind only the faint scent of ozone and the lingering impression that the galaxy had just become a much more dangerous place. On the main screen, the human ship reappeared exactly where it had vanished, as if it had never left. Director Harrison's voice returned to the communication channel. I trust the Council found our presentation informative. Humanity looks forward to peaceful coexistence with all galactic civilizations, provided our territorial sovereignty is respected. Quote. The transmission ended, and the human ship accelerated smoothly away from Nexus Prime. Within minutes, it had vanished into hyperspace, using a drive system that operated on principles the galaxy's greatest minds couldn't even begin to understand. In the silence that followed, Admiral Corvex finally understood why Commander Zarkthos had looked like a broken soldier in his classified briefing. The Vorth Supremacy, like every other galactic civilization, had just discovered that they were no longer at the top of the food chain. Humanity had arrived, and they had made it very clear that they were not interested in following anyone else's rules. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months had passed since humanity's dramatic introduction to the Galactic Council. In that time, the galaxy had experienced an unprecedented period of peace. Species that had been locked in territorial disputes for centuries suddenly found themselves eager to negotiate. Expansion fleets that had been preparing for conquest operations abruptly changed course to return home. The Vorth Supremacy, once the most aggressive military force in known space, had quietly withdrawn from dozens of frontier systems. But peace, as humanity had learned from their own history, often carried the seeds of future conflict. In the Outer Rim territories, far from the established trade routes and diplomatic channels, rumors were spreading, stories of ghost ships that appeared without warning, of military installations that went dark overnight, of entire fleets that simply vanished without sending distress signals. The whispered tales all shared common elements. Mysterious attackers who moved like shadows, struck without warning, and left behind only empty ships and the lingering scent of fear. The rumors spoke of the Reaper. Captain Zethvar of the Korthak hegemony studied the latest intelligence reports with growing unease. The Korthak were not members of the Galactic Council, preferring to operate as an independent military contractor organization. They provided security services, tactical support, and occasionally more aggressive solutions to clients who preferred to avoid official diplomatic channels. The hegemony had built their reputation on their ability to handle situations that the Council couldn't or wouldn't address directly. Their forces were well-trained, well-equipped, and utterly ruthless when necessary. They had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with sufficient application of firepower. Until now. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we've lost contact with another patrol squadron. The Crimson Dawn, Steel Fang, and Night Hunter were investigating reports of pirate activity in the Kepler 442 system. They transmitted routine status updates for 3 days, then went silent." Quote, Zethvar drummed his clawed fingers against his command console. "Same pattern as the others?" "Yes, sir. No distress signals, no signs of combat damage when we found the ships. The crews were alive, but changed. They couldn't remember anything about their missions. When we tried to access their ship's computers, all tactical data had been wiped. This was the 7th Squadron to suffer the same fate in the past 2 months. Each time, Korthak forces would respond to routine security contracts in remote systems, only to be found days later, floating powerless in space, with their crews suffering from selective memory loss and their military databases completely erased. The pattern suggested a systematic campaign against Korthak operations, but no enemy had claimed responsibility. The affected crews spoke of shadows that moved independently of any light source, of voices that seemed to come from inside their own minds, and of a presence that felt like standing at the edge of a vast, dark ocean. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Hegemony Command. Priority Alpha clearance." The main screen flickered, revealing the angular features of Supreme Commander Vrakthos, leader of the Korthak military hierarchy. His scarred face carried the grim expression of someone who had built his career on solving impossible problems through superior violence. "Captain Zethvar," he began without preamble, "you are to proceed immediately to coordinates 7 Mark 49. A situation has developed that requires immediate attention." Zethvar straightened in his command chair. "What kind of situation, sir?" "The kind that could end our organization's existence if not handled properly. 3 hours ago, we received a communication from something calling itself the Terran Defense Coordination. They have concerns about our recent activities." The words sent a chill through every officer on the bridge. Since humanity's dramatic appearance before the Galactic Council, every military organization in known space had been trying to gather intelligence about human capabilities. The results had been universally unsettling. "What do they want?" Zethvar asked. They want to discuss our organization's future employment policies. Apparently, they object to some of our recent contracts. Vrakthos paused, and for the first time in Zethvar's memory, the Supreme Commander looked genuinely concerned. Captain, the humans know about every operation we've conducted in the past year. Classified operations, black book contracts, missions that officially never happened. They know everything. This was impossible. Korthak operational security was absolute. Their communication networks used quantum encryption that couldn't be broken by any known technology. Their personnel were selected for absolute loyalty and subjected to neural conditioning that made betrayal literally unthinkable. How could they have penetrated our security? Zethvar demanded. They didn't penetrate it, Captain. They bypassed it entirely. According to our technical analysis, the humans somehow accessed information directly from our commanders' minds without them being aware of it. The implications were staggering. If humans could extract classified information from military personnel without detection, then no security system in the galaxy was safe. Your orders are to proceed to the designated coordinates and await further instructions. Vrakthos continued. You will be accompanied by Battle Group 7 under Admiral Kethran. This situation requires our best people. The transmission ended, leaving Zethvar to contemplate the unprecedented nature of their assignment. In 30 years of military service, he had never been ordered to negotiate with an enemy who had already demonstrated the ability to neutralize Korthak forces without firing a shot. Battle Group 7 consisted of 12 heavy battleships, 4 assault carriers, and supporting vessels. Enough firepower to level a small planet. If the humans wanted a demonstration of Korthak military might, they would certainly get one. The journey to the designated coordinates took 18 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity. When they emerged at the rendezvous point, Zethvar expected to find an empty star system where they could wait for human contact. Instead, they found something that defied explanation. Floating in space ahead of them was a structure that seemed to exist partially outside normal three-dimensional space. It appeared solid and translucent at the same time, its geometry shifting constantly in ways that hurt to look at directly. The sensors couldn't get consistent readings on its size, composition, or internal structure. Captain, the sensor operator reported with obvious strain, the object appears to be simultaneously 1 kilometer and 100 kilometers in diameter, depending on which instruments we use to measure it. Before Zethvar could process this information, a communication request arrived from the impossible structure. He accepted it immediately, and the main screen displayed a human figure sitting at what appeared to be a simple desk in an ordinary office. The contrast between the mundane setting and the alien structure outside was somehow more disturbing than any overt display of advanced technology. Good morning, Captain Zethvar, the human said in perfect Korthak standard. I am Director Harrison, of the Terran Defense Coordination. Thank you for responding to our invitation so promptly. Zethvar noticed that the human had addressed him by name and rank without any introduction. Director, I am here on behalf of Supreme Commander Vrakthos to discuss your concerns about our organization. Harrison nodded pleasantly. Indeed. The Korthak hegemony has built quite a reputation for itself as a provider of military solutions to complex political problems. We've been studying your operational history with great interest. The human gestured, and holographic displays appeared around Zethvar's bridge showing classified Korthak mission records. The captain recognized operations from decades past, including several that had been conducted under such deep cover that only a handful of people in the universe should have known about them. Impressive tactical efficiency, Harrison continued, reviewing the data as if he were discussing weather patterns. The hegemony has successfully destabilized 17 different governments, eliminated 43 political figures who were inconvenient to your clients, and facilitated the conquest of 38 star systems by providing security services that happen to eliminate all local resistance. Admiral Kethran's voice crackled over the communication channel from his flagship. Human, you will cease this unauthorized access to classified information immediately. These records are protected by quantum encryption protocols that were developed by the Vorth Supremacy approximately 80 years ago, Harrison interrupted smoothly. Quite sophisticated by galactic standards. Unfortunately, they operate on the assumption that information can only be accessed through technological means. The human smiled, and every Korthak officer watching felt an inexplicable urge to check their own ship's security systems. Human intelligence gathering operates on rather different principles. We prefer to think of information as a resource that wants to be shared. Harrison stood and walked to what appeared to be a window, though the view outside showed impossible geometric shapes that existed in more than 3 dimensions. The problem, gentlemen, is that your organization has been accepting contracts that conflict with humanity's interests. Specifically, you have been helping certain species expand their territories through conquest and forced integration. Captain Zethvar felt his combat training asserting itself. The Korthak hegemony operates under legal mercenary protocols established by galactic convention. Our contracts are legal, Harrison agreed, within the framework of existing galactic law. Unfortunately, humanity does not recognize the authority of galactic law within our sphere of influence. The human turned back to face them, and his expression had shifted subtly. The pleasant diplomatic mask was still in place, but something cold and implacable showed through underneath. The Korthak hegemony will immediately cease all operations involving the conquest, subjugation, or elimination of sapient species. You will also provide us with a complete list of all clients who have contracted for such services in the past 5 years. Admiral Kethran's response was immediate and predictable. The hegemony does not take orders from primitive species who have barely developed faster than light travel. If you want to negotiate, you can do so through proper diplomatic channels. Harrison sighed sadly. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this. Captain Zethvar, Admiral Kethran, allow me to introduce you to one of my colleagues. The office setting vanished, replaced by an image of the Korthak fleet from an external perspective. Floating in space near Admiral Kethran's flagship was a human figure in simple dark clothing. The figure appeared to be standing on empty space as if it were solid ground. That's impossible, Zethvar breathed. Nothing can survive in hard vacuum without protective equipment. Meet Operative 3, Harrison announced. We call him Reaper. The human figure raised one hand toward the flagship, and every system on Admiral Kethran's vessel immediately went dark. Emergency power failed. Life support shut down. Communications went dead. The massive battleship, pride of the Korthak fleet, became a lifeless hull drifting in space. But that was just the beginning. Reaper began to move between the ships of Battle Group 7 with impossible speed, touching each vessel briefly before moving to the next. As he made contact with each ship, its systems failed in sequence. Weapons, shields, engines, life support, everything that made a battleship dangerous became useless metal floating in the void. Within 5 minutes, the entire Korthak battle group was powerless and helpless. The crews are unharmed, Harrison explained calmly as his colleague completed his work. Their life support will be restored shortly, along with minimal propulsion capability to return to Korthak space. However, all weapons systems and military databases have been permanently disabled. Captain Zethvar watched in horrified fascination as the human figure completed its circuit of the fleet, then simply vanished as if it had never existed. Moments later, emergency power began returning to the disabled ships, but their combat capabilities remained offline. How? Was all Zethvar could manage. Harrison returned to his desk, settling back into his chair as if he had just completed a routine administrative task. Enhanced humans can manipulate electromagnetic fields through conscious thought, Captain. Every advanced technology depends on controlled electromagnetic interactions. We simply interrupt those interactions. The demonstration was over, but its implications would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. If humans could disable entire fleets without weapons, then traditional military strength was meaningless. The Korthak hegemony has a choice, Harrison continued. You can adapt your business model to focus on defensive contracts and legitimate security services, or you can be permanently removed from operation. The decision is yours. Admiral Kethran's voice returned to the channel, transmitted from his crippled flagship on emergency power. You cannot simply dictate terms to a sovereign military organization. The hegemony has contracts, obligations. Had Harrison corrected. Past tense. As of today, any contract involving aggressive military action against sapient species is void. Your clients have been informed that their agreements are no longer enforceable. This was impossible. The Korthak hegemony had dozens of active contracts worth billions of credits. Their entire economic structure depended on the completion of those agreements. What about compensation? Zethvar asked. Our organization has invested significant resources in current operations. The resources you invested in conquest and subjugation are a sunk cost, Harrison replied without sympathy. However, humanity is prepared to offer alternative employment opportunities for organizations willing to redirect their capabilities toward more constructive purposes. The human gestured, and new holographic displays appeared showing star charts of the galactic rim territories. The outer systems are plagued by piracy, slave trading, and various forms of criminal activity. These problems require military solutions, but they also require organizations willing to operate under strict rules of engagement that prohibit collateral damage to civilian populations. Zethvar studied the data with professional interest. The proposed operations would be challenging and potentially profitable, but they would require a complete restructuring of Korthak operational doctrine. What kind of oversight would be required? He asked. Harrison smiled, and this time the expression seemed genuinely warm. Each operation would be monitored by a human observer. You would have access to enhanced intelligence capabilities and tactical support when needed. In return, you would operate under strict humanitarian protocols. Admiral Kethran's voice carried a note of outrage. The Korthak hegemony has never operated under outside oversight. We are not mercenaries to be managed by alien species. No, Harrison agreed. You are either partners in maintaining galactic stability, or you are a problem to be solved. There is no third option. The choice was stark and immediate. The hegemony could adapt to a new reality where their traditional business model was no longer viable. Or they could face systematic elimination by enemies they couldn't fight with conventional weapons. Captain Zethvar made his decision quickly. On behalf of the Korthak hegemony, I accept your terms in principle. However, the final decision must come from Supreme Commander Vrakthos. Of course, Harrison nodded. The Supreme Commander is welcome to review our proposal at his convenience. However, I should mention that all current offensive operations must cease immediately, regardless of his decision. The transmission ended, leaving the Korthak fleet floating powerless in space, while their commanders contemplated a future that bore no resemblance to the galaxy they had known. Over the next several hours, as their ships limped back toward Korthak space on minimal power, reports began arriving from across the galaxy. The hegemony was not the only military organization that had received human attention. The Sartak Syndicate, notorious for their slave trading operations, had awakened to find their entire leadership missing. They were discovered 3 days later on a remote planet, suffering from complete memory loss and an inexplicable psychological aversion to any form of violence. The Vexian war machine, a massive military-industrial complex that supplied weapons to aggressive species throughout the galaxy, had experienced simultaneous equipment failures across all their manufacturing facilities. Every weapons system they produced had simply stopped functioning, rendering their entire inventory useless. The Crimson Fleet, pirates who had terrorized merchant shipping for decades, had been found floating in space near their base of operations. Their ships were intact, their crews unharmed, but every member suffered from a condition that made them physically unable to commit acts of violence or theft. In each case, the message was the same. Aggressive military action against sapient species would no longer be tolerated. The galaxy's criminal and military organizations found themselves facing a choice between adaptation and elimination. Most chose adaptation. Within 6 months of humanity's intervention, the galactic crime rate had dropped by 70%. Territorial wars between species ceased entirely. The slave trade collapsed when traders discovered they could no longer psychologically function in that profession. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy's established civilizations viewed their own military capabilities. The realization that all their advanced technology could be neutralized by a single human operative had profound implications for interspecies relations. The Galactic Council found itself dealing with an unprecedented outbreak of peace. Species that had been enemies for millennia suddenly discovered a mutual interest in diplomatic solutions to their differences. Trade agreements replaced territorial disputes. Scientific cooperation flourished where military competition had once dominated. And throughout it all, the humans remained in their claimed territory, apparently content to monitor galactic affairs from a distance. They had made their position clear. They wanted to be left alone, but they would not tolerate aggression or exploitation anywhere within their sphere of influence. The name Reaper became legend throughout the galaxy. Some species spoke of it as a cautionary tale, warning their children about the consequences of violence. Others told stories of mysterious figures who appeared to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. But for those who had personally encountered the Reaper's attention, the name carried a different meaning entirely. It represented the moment when they realized that the universe was not as they had understood it, and that humanity was something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Captain Zethvar kept the classified recordings of his encounter with the humans in a secured file that he reviewed regularly, not because he enjoyed being reminded of his defeat, but because he needed to remember the lesson that day had taught him. The galaxy had changed. The old rules no longer applied. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Reapers waited patiently for anyone foolish enough to test humanity's resolve. They moved like whispering wind, vanished like shadow, and their very existence had rewritten the fundamental equations of power in the known universe. The Korthak hegemony, like every other military organization in the galaxy, had learned to respect that new reality, or face the consequences, in the depths of space. Far from any established trade route or diplomatic facility, Supreme Commander Vrakthos stood alone in his private chambers aboard the fortress ship Absolute Authority. The Korthak hegemony's mobile command center was a marvel of military engineering, armed with enough firepower to reduce planets to rubble and shielded by defensive systems that could withstand direct hits from stellar-class weapons, none of which had mattered when the humans decided to demonstrate their capabilities. Vrakthos reviewed the reports from Captain Zethvar and Admiral Kethron for the 100th time, searching for some detail that might offer hope for a military solution. The recordings showed their forces being systematically disabled by a single human operative who moved through space without protective equipment and shut down advanced technology with his bare hands. The implications were staggering. If humans could neutralize Korthak military superiority so easily, then everything the hegemony had built over the past century was meaningless. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Vrakthos expected another report from his field commanders, but instead found himself looking at the face of Director Harrison. "Good evening, Supreme Commander," the human said pleasantly. "I trust you've had time to review the proposal we discussed with your subordinates." Vrakthos felt his combat instincts surge, but forced himself to remain calm. "How did you access this channel?" "This is a classified military communication system. Classification is a relative concept," Harrison replied with a slight smile. "From our perspective, information wants to be shared. Your quantum encryption simply provides the illusion of security." The human leaned forward slightly, and his expression became more serious. "I'm calling to discuss your organization's future, Supreme Commander. The galaxy is changing, and the Korthak hegemony can either evolve with it or become extinct. The choice is yours." Vrakthos had built his career on never backing down from a fight, regardless of the odds. The hegemony has faced extinction scenarios before. "We have always found a way to survive through superior tactics and overwhelming force." "Superior tactics require an understanding of your enemy's capabilities," Harrison observed. "Overwhelming force requires weapons that can affect your target. Neither of those advantages apply in your current situation." The human gestured, and holographic displays appeared in Vrakthos's private chamber, showing detailed schematics of the Absolute Authority's most classified systems. Weapons configurations that were known only to the ship's chief engineer, defensive protocols that existed only in Vrakthos's personal files, tactical doctrines that had never been recorded in any database. "We know everything about your capabilities," Harrison continued. "Your ship's specifications, your tactical preferences, Your psychological profile. Your personal history. We know that you joined the hegemony after your homeworld was conquered by the Zeltrathi Empire. We know that your motivation for building a military organization was to prevent other species from suffering the same fate your people experienced. Vrakthos felt something cold settle in his stomach. Those details weren't recorded anywhere. His personal history had been classified and sealed when he assumed command of the hegemony. Admirable motivation, Harrison said with what seemed like genuine respect. The desire to protect others from conquest and subjugation is something humanity understands very well. Unfortunately, your methods have become part of the problem you originally set out to solve. The human stood and moved to what appeared to be a window, though the view beyond showed star patterns that Vrakthos didn't recognize. The Korthak hegemony has prevented 17 conquest attempts against weaker species. Commendable. However, you have also facilitated 23 successful conquests by providing military support to aggressive clients. The mathematics of your existence show a net negative impact on galactic stability. This was the fundamental contradiction that had haunted Vrakthos for years. The hegemony needed resources to maintain their military capabilities, which meant accepting contracts from clients who could pay their fees. Not all of those clients shared the hegemony's original idealistic goals. Military organizations require funding, Vrakthos said defensively. We cannot protect innocent species without the resources to maintain our fleets and personnel. True, Harrison agreed. Which is why humanity is prepared to offer alternative funding sources for organizations willing to redirect their capabilities toward legitimate defensive operations. The human turned back to face the screen, and Vrakthos was surprised to see what appeared to be genuine empathy in his expression. Supreme Commander, your organization has the potential to become a significant force for stability in the galaxy. Your personnel are well-trained, your tactical doctrine is sound, and your leadership understands the value of protecting innocent life. These are valuable assets. Harrison gestured again, and new displays appeared, showing star charts of the Outer Rim territories. The galactic periphery is plagued by piracy, slavery, and various forms of organized crime. These activities flourish because the established civilizations focus their attention on core systems, while ignoring frontier regions. Vrakthos studied the data with professional interest. The operational requirements would be challenging, requiring coordination across vast distances and the ability to respond quickly to developing situations. What kind of support would be provided? He asked. Enhanced intelligence capabilities, advanced tactical coordination systems, and direct intervention support when required, Harrison replied. Human operatives would work alongside your personnel to ensure mission success, while maintaining strict rules of engagement regarding civilian casualties. The offer was attractive, but Vrakthos had learned to be suspicious of agreements that seemed too good to be true. What assurance do I have that humanity's definition of acceptable operations won't change once we've restructured our entire organization? Harrison smiled, and for the first time in the conversation, his expression carried a hint of something dangerous. Supreme Commander, if humanity wanted to eliminate the Korthak hegemony, this conversation would not be necessary. We could simply erase your organization from existence, and no one in the galaxy would be able to stop us. The casual confidence in that statement was more terrifying than any threat could have been. Vrakthos realized that he was not negotiating from a position of strength, but from a position of complete helplessness. However, Harrison continued, we prefer cooperation to destruction whenever possible. Your organization has value that would be wasted if we simply eliminated it. The human paused, allowing Vrakthos to consider his options. I should mention that several other military organizations have already accepted similar arrangements. The results have been quite positive for all parties involved. This was the moment of decision. Vrakthos could maintain the hegemony's independence and face systematic destruction by enemies he couldn't fight. Or he could adapt to a new reality where traditional military supremacy was no longer possible. I accept your terms, he said finally. The Korthak hegemony will redirect its operations toward defensive contracts and anti-criminal activities. However, I want guarantees that our personnel will be treated as equals in joint operations, not as subordinates under human command. Harrison nodded approvingly. Acceptable. Your tactical expertise and operational experience are valuable assets that we have no interest in wasting. Joint operations will be conducted on a partnership basis, with strategic coordination provided by human intelligence services. The human gestured once more, and contract documents appeared in the air between them. The terms were detailed and comprehensive, covering everything from operational protocols to compensation structures. One final item, Harrison said as Vrakthos reviewed the agreement. All current offensive contracts must be terminated immediately. Your clients have already been informed that their agreements are void. Vrakthos felt a moment of concern about the financial implications, but realized that arguing was pointless. The humans had already demonstrated their ability to enforce their decisions regardless of his preferences. Understood, he replied. How quickly do you want the transition to begin? Immediately. Your first assignment will be to address pirate activity in the Sigma Draconis sector. Intelligence indicates that 3 major criminal organizations have established bases in that region and are preying on merchant traffic. The assignment was exactly the kind of operation that had originally motivated Vrakthos to build the hegemony. Protecting innocent travelers from predators was the reason he had dedicated his life to military service. We can have forces in position within 72 hours, he said. Excellent. You'll be working with Operative 9 for this mission. She'll provide tactical support and ensure that rules of engagement are maintained. The transmission ended, leaving Vrakthos alone with his thoughts and the realization that the galaxy had changed forever. The age of military supremacy through technological superiority was over. Humanity had introduced new rules to the game, and survival required adaptation to those rules. But perhaps, Vrakthos thought, as he began issuing orders to prepare for their new mission, this change might not be entirely negative. The hegemony would finally be able to focus on their original purpose, protecting the innocent and maintaining stability in a dangerous universe. And if that meant working alongside human operatives who could bend reality to their will, then so be it. The name Reaper had become a symbol of fear throughout the galaxy's criminal organizations. But for those who chose to work with humanity rather than against it, that same name might represent something else entirely: hope. 2 years after humanity's emergence onto the galactic stage, the universe had settled into an uneasy peace. The major civilizations had adapted to the new reality, where aggressive expansion was no longer viable. Military organizations had retooled themselves for defensive operations. Criminal syndicates had either disbanded or found themselves fundamentally unable to engage in their traditional activities. But peace, as any student of history knew, often masked deeper conflicts brewing beneath the surface. In the depths of the Andromeda Array, a massive space station that existed in the void between galaxies, representatives of the oldest civilizations in known space gathered in absolute secrecy. The Eternal Dominion, the First Empire, the Ancient Collective, species so old that they had been manipulating galactic affairs since before most current civilizations had developed faster than light travel. They called themselves the Architects, and they were not pleased with recent developments. Supreme Architect Valdris, a being whose species had transcended physical form billions of years ago, manifested as a shimmering column of pure energy as he addressed the gathering. The situation has become unacceptable. Our carefully constructed balance of power has been disrupted by a single primitive species that should not even possess faster than light capability. The other architects responded with harmonics of agreement. For eons, they had guided galactic development from the shadows, ensuring that no single species became powerful enough to threaten their long-term plans. They had seeded conflicts, manipulated trade routes, and occasionally eliminated civilizations that grew too advanced too quickly. Humanity represented their greatest failure in recorded history. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that should be impossible for a biological species, reported Architect Nexus, whose crystalline form pulsed with data streams. Our analysis indicates they have somehow transcended the normal limitations of organic matter without abandoning their biological origins. Architect Terminus, ancient beyond measure and possessing wisdom accumulated over geological ages, projected images of human operations throughout the galaxy. They have systematically neutralized every aggressive military force in known space. Criminal organizations have been eliminated or converted to their purposes. The natural cycle of conquest and resistance that has maintained galactic balance for millions of years has been completely disrupted. This was the heart of the problem. The architects had spent countless millennia cultivating a galaxy where conflict was constant but controlled, where no single species could achieve dominance, where advancement was limited by the need to constantly defend against external threats. Humanity had broken that system completely. "What do we know about their enhancement processes?" Valdris inquired. "Very little," Nexus admitted. "Our attempts to infiltrate human space have failed completely. The individuals they call Reapers appear to exist partially outside normal space-time, making them impossible to track or analyze with conventional methods. Architect Chorus, whose existence spanned multiple dimensions simultaneously, provided additional data. We have detected quantum signatures suggesting that humans have learned to manipulate fundamental forces through conscious will alone. This should require technology beyond anything we have developed in our billions of years of existence." The implications were staggering. If humans could naturally evolve capabilities that exceeded the achievements of species who had been advancing for geological ages, then everything the architects believed about biological limitations was wrong. "There is a more disturbing possibility," Terminus said quietly. "Our analysis of human DNA suggests artificial modifications that predate their development of advanced technology. Someone or something enhanced their species long before they achieved spaceflight." The gathering fell silent as the implications sank in. If humanity had been artificially enhanced by some unknown force, then they might represent the vanguard of something far more dangerous than a single aggressive species. "Recommendations?" Valdris asked. "Direct confrontation is inadvisable," Nexus reported. "Human military capabilities appear to be beyond our ability to counter through conventional means. However, we have identified potential weaknesses in their operational structure." New displays appeared, showing detailed analysis of human activities over the past 2 years. The humans appear to operate with a very small number of enhanced individuals. Our estimates suggest no more than 50 Reapers exist in their entire population. If these key operatives could be neutralized, their ability to project power throughout the galaxy would be severely compromised. Architect Chorus pulsed with harmonics of consideration. "How do you propose to neutralize beings who can exist partially outside normal spacetime?" "By attacking them in a dimension where their advantages are meaningless," Nexus replied. "We have developed weapons that operate on quantum levels that biological matter cannot access. If we can force the Reapers into direct confrontation, we can eliminate them before they can phase shift to safety." Terminus projected skepticism. "This plan assumes the humans will respond to provocation in predictable ways. Our analysis suggests they are far more intelligent than we initially calculated." Valdris made the decision with the authority of eons. "The risk of allowing humanity to continue their expansion is greater than the risk of direct confrontation. Begin preparation of the quantum disruptor network. If the humans want to play at being galactic peacekeepers, we will teach them the cost of interfering with forces beyond their comprehension." The architects dispersed to their respective domains, each carrying instructions for a plan that would either restore the galactic balance they had maintained for millions of years, or destroy everything they had built in the attempt. Neither possibility concerned them greatly. In their vast experience, civilizations rose and fell like waves on a beach. What mattered was ensuring that no single wave ever became large enough to drown the shore. 3 months later, the first phase of the architect's plan began with a series of seemingly unrelated incidents across the galaxy. A Vorth research station studying quantum mechanics experienced a catastrophic accident that killed all personnel and destroyed years of scientific data. A Zephyrian exploration vessel investigating anomalous energy readings in deep space simply vanished, leaving behind only a debris field of crystalline fragments. Each incident shared common characteristics: the presence of technology that operated on principles unknown to galactic science, the complete elimination of all witnesses, and quantum signatures that suggested involvement by forces operating outside normal space-time. Director Harrison sat in his office aboard the Terran Defense Station, reviewing reports from Reaper operatives throughout the galaxy. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable. Someone was systematically attacking facilities and personnel involved in advanced physics research, specifically targeting projects related to dimensional manipulation and quantum field theory. Analysis? He asked Operative 15, who materialized from the shadows near his desk. Unknown aggressors with technology that exceeds anything in our databases, she replied in the calm, measured tones that all Reapers had learned to use. The attacks showed tactical sophistication and strategic coordination that suggests a single controlling intelligence. Harrison nodded grimly. Any indication of their objectives? They appear to be targeting research into the fundamental forces that our enhancement processes utilize. If they're attempting to develop countermeasures against Reaper capabilities, they're going about it very intelligently. This was troubling news. Humanity's dominance in galactic affairs depended on their ability to operate beyond the technological limitations that constrained other species. If someone had developed methods to neutralize those advantages, the entire balance of power would shift dramatically. Deploy additional operatives to monitor the affected regions, Harrison ordered. I want early warning if these attacks continue. But even as he spoke, he knew they were already too late. The enemy had been operating in the shadows for months, gathering intelligence and preparing for something much larger than random attacks on research facilities. The true scope of the threat became apparent 6 weeks later, when every Reaper operative in the galaxy simultaneously experienced something unprecedented. They lost contact with their enhanced abilities. Operative 7, who had been conducting a routine patrol near the Korthak hegemony's new operational base, found himself unable to phase shift through solid matter. Operative 12, investigating pirate activity in the Outer Rim systems, discovered that she could no longer manipulate electromagnetic fields with her consciousness. Across the galaxy, 50 of the most dangerous individuals in known space suddenly found themselves reduced to merely human capabilities. The timing was not coincidental. As the Reapers struggled to understand what had happened to their abilities, massive fleets began emerging from hyperspace in systems throughout the galaxy. Not the familiar ships of established civilizations, but vessels that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their hulls shifting between solid matter and pure energy. The architects had revealed themselves at last. The first battle took place in the Alpha Centauri system, where Operative 3 had been working with local defense forces to establish a security perimeter. When his abilities suddenly failed, he found himself facing a fleet of ships that could phase through conventional weapons and shields with ease. All human vessels in the Alpha Centauri system came a transmission in perfect galactic standard. You are ordered to surrender immediately. Resistance is futile. Your enhanced capabilities have been neutralized. Operative 3, despite being reduced to baseline human capabilities, was far from helpless. His years of training and experience had made him a formidable warrior, even without supernatural abilities. Negative. Terran defense forces do not surrender to unidentified aggressors. Then you will be destroyed. The voice replied with the calm certainty of beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. What followed was the first real test of human military capabilities without the advantage of Reaper enhancements. The results surprised everyone, including humanity's enemies. Operative 3 commanded a single heavy cruiser supported by 2 destroyer escorts. Facing him was a battle fleet of 30 vessels using technology that exceeded anything in the galaxy's databases. By any rational calculation, the outcome should have been a foregone conclusion. But humans, as the galaxy had already learned, rarely followed rational expectations. All ships, implement Emergency Doctrine 7, Operative 3, ordered. Target the lead vessels with everything we have. If they want a fight, we'll give them one, they'll remember. The human ships attacked with a ferocity that caught the architects off guard. Instead of trying to match their enemies' advanced technology, they used pure aggression and tactical unpredictability to disrupt the larger fleet's coordination. When the architect vessels phased through human weapons fire, the humans simply detonated their warheads inside the enemy ship's hulls. When the enemy tried to use their dimensional advantages to attack from unexpected angles, the humans anticipated the maneuvers and were waiting with concentrated firepower. The battle lasted 18 hours and ended with the destruction of 12 architect vessels and severe damage to the remaining fleet. The human ships were also destroyed, but Operative 3 and most of his crew escaped in life pods to tell their story. More importantly, they had proven that humanity was dangerous even without their enhanced capabilities. Similar battles erupted across the galaxy as architect fleets attempted to capitalize on the Reapers' sudden vulnerability. But instead of the easy victories they had expected, they found themselves engaged in grinding conflicts with human forces that seemed to become more effective the longer the fighting continued. Director Harrison, monitoring the situation from his command post, realized that their enemies had made a critical error in their planning. They had assumed that neutralizing the Reapers would cripple human military effectiveness. In reality, it had forced humanity to rely on their other advantages: tactical flexibility, strategic unpredictability, and an absolute refusal to surrender under any circumstances. "Report from all theaters," he requested from his intelligence staff. "Heavy fighting in 17 systems," came the reply. "Enemy forces are taking significant casualties, but they're maintaining pressure across all fronts. Our ships are outnumbered approximately 12 to 1, but we're inflicting disproportionate damage." Harrison nodded. The numbers were bad, but not impossibly so. Human forces had faced worse odds before, albeit not against enemies with such advanced technology. Any progress on restoring Reaper abilities? Negative. The quantum interference network the enemy is using appears to disrupt the dimensional interfaces that our enhancement processes utilize. However, our scientists believe they've identified weaknesses in the system. This was encouraging news. If humanity could find a way to counter the architect's quantum disruptor technology, the balance of the conflict would shift dramatically. Time estimate? Unknown. The technology operates on principles we don't fully understand. It could be days or years before we develop effective countermeasures. Harrison made his decision quickly. Implement Contingency Plan Omega. If we can't use our enhanced capabilities, we'll have to win this war the old-fashioned way. Contingency Plan Omega was humanity's ultimate fallback strategy, developed during the early years after their first contact with galactic civilization. It assumed a scenario where human technological advantages had been neutralized, and they faced enemies with superior numbers and equipment. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. If humanity couldn't win through superior capabilities, they would win through